So Jamie edited something called Triangulation for Parsec, which is a local science fiction, fantasy, and horror collective. Has a lot of different things that they do here in the city, and one of them is this annual anthology called Triangulation that our friend Diane Turnchek invented 20 years ago now. And it's got this really cool premise, triangulation, that it would be at equal parts fantasy, science fiction, and horror, and a theme for each issue, and you would look at that theme from three distinctly different, even-handed, evenly distributed.
I do have
genres.
to admit, I think mine probably had a little less horror in it than maybe. So these two took over when I was done. I was like, I am finished with this. I don't want to do it anymore.
It's been pointed out that
Like she dropped it and we caught it.
It's exhausting, and they don't pay you anything, so it's just volunteer time. So I
worked on several issues.
when I was
worked on
done,
2 and I worked on 4.
I just punted it super hard, and these two took over. And
we'd already been working for as slush pile shovelers for
right.
a little while, and you bought one of my stories, the
I did, yeah.
Love at the End of the World.
One of Frank's stories is the anchor story to, I think, the first year of Triangulation that I edited.
Is
And
anchor story a term we need to define?
don't tell anybody, but I put it at the end of the book because it was my favorite.
Oh,
I'm not supposed to have favorites. But I definitely did. And Frank's always been my favorite.
oh, thank you.
Yeah. So we have a varied history together as friends. One of the first readings I did in Pittsburgh, I did at a bookstore Frank owned.
Yep.
And
LJ's used book.
yeah, so he was there, sitting there being the owner of a bookstore, so kind of intimidating, an eldritch kind of figure.
Giant.
And I'm there trying to do my reading and real wanting to impress him, because you want to impress everyone when you're doing a reading. It's very much a seeking validation kind of activity. But he said nice things, and then later, we started going to the same writing group, and now we're friends.
There were 300 people there. I remember. As
yeah.
it goes with most.
Super well
most
attended.
readings.
Those of you who aren't here in person can't tell, but there's a lot of people.
Wow. You in the back.
Standing room only.
But they're the very best people.
Yes.
We only let the good ones in. That was the secret. But yes, so let's see. Writing level stuff. So
I was thinking about a thing. So you said your versions of Triangulation were more fantasy and science fiction heavy.
Probably, yes.
I was trying really hard to make mine equal parts because I loved the concept.
To
But
be fair, him saying it just now is probably the first time I've actually heard that as the concept, as part of the name. So no one ever explained it to me.
all right. I thought you explained it to me. Maybe
No.
I made
See,
it up.
you made it all
Made
up.
it up. Or Diane explained it to
It's
you.
possible. It's possible. But I had it pointed out to me afterward that though I was very careful to do equal parts. Really what I made was what Frank and I made was a collection of weird fantasy, weird science fiction, and weird horror. Because you bring to such a thing what you have, you may or may not be aware of the way you're spinning it.
I do wonder, if that means that all the stories and the ones I edited are tended to be shorter. Short science fiction.
Well, I think it's time to examine your own weird tendencies, because thinking about the stories that we printed in Triangulation of yours, and thinking about the story that's in here,
My Triangulation stories do get a little weird sometimes.
it's possible that you have a little more weird to you than you're willing to
I mean,
entirely fess up to.
like,
So it's
that's
wonderful
what
to me.
Purpose was supposed to be the weird one.
Yes, that was my hoped for segue.
Yes.
This collection of 45 stories, if you've written 45 stories that could go in a collection of weird fiction,
All right.
it is possible you are a
Possible.
weird fiction author.
It's possible I'm just weird. I mean, it's what my grandfather thinks.
Okay.
And I dedicated this book to him.
Yeah.
Because I'm petty. Let's move on. But yes, so yeah, there are 45 stories in here, and some of them are super short, some of them are a little longer, but none of them are super long because it's not a huge book, and 45 stories.
It's a good grab and go when you need a fix. of a
Yes.
story.
I am very happy with the cover, which Todd, who's here, helped me with. It is a glass plate photograph, and the cover story, the Shadows on Glass, features glass plate photography because I listened to an NPR story, you know, ideas, they're everywhere. And I actually found a glass plate photograph from the Civil War and just made it purple because purple's my favorite color. And
Purple's the color of magic.
and so, yeah, and so
Dark.
inspired by these two, I joined the Horror Writers Association this year. I've been in the science fiction and fantasy writers for a while. But I joined the HWA and inspired by these two, now I'm putting together a horror collection.
Yay.
Which I think is going to come out next October is my plan. But I have to find a creepier cover than this one. For when I'm like, you know, trying to shill my books other places and be like, no, this is just the weird one. This is the creepy one.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
Marketing.
yeah. Not easy.
Gotta be able to judge by that cover.
Exactly.
Tell me.
Are you
Yeah.
gonna read us a story? Is
Is it time to read? We can, no one has any authority over us.
Yeah, well, we're gonna keep pestering you and keep asking you
All right,
questions.
so do you want me to read first? Do you want me to read
You want us to be the opening act?
or do you, it's up to you.
Mhm.
I figured we would just bounce back and forth like ping pong balls.
That's
We could all
fine.
take turns.
That's fine with me.
Taking turns seems fair.
Yeah,
Do you want to go first?
you can always
You
read.
can step aside.
He likes to read, guys, in case you haven't picked it up. He enjoys doing it.
I'm Douglas Gwilym, and I write weird, dark sci-fi and weird fantasy and horror and amalgamations of all that, but it's really kind of Twilight Zone. Twilight Zone's kind of my thing.
Nominated for a Stoker.
I was my story Poppy's Poppy was a finalist for a Bram Stoker Award this year, which was pretty cool. I could read that. That's a fun one to read. I'll read that one. Felt like a segue. Sometimes I go into Daddy's office when he's out in the garage or still at work, and Marjorie and Mama are too busy to want my help. I'm not really supposed to because of the time I got into Daddy's stamp collection and reorganized it, but I'm older now. I don't touch anything. I just look. Mama always says it's important to remember that you don't look with your hands. I look, and he looks back, and I don't touch, but sometimes we talk. He whispers, and I listen and try to say something back that he'd understand. Something about how life is now, about how we're all okay, how he shouldn't worry. I think he worries. He sat there on top of Daddy's computer desk for a long time before I noticed him, probably longer than I've been around since when there was only Marjorie. He's in a frame, but I don't think it bothers him. It's got pretty green and red stones around it, and there's a sparkle like that near his eyes, even if it is black and white. So it seems like a good place for him. He has Daddy's black eyebrows, and his eyes look the way Daddy's look when he says, "Elizabeth, this is very serious." And his hair is short, but curly and parted funny to either side, like he doesn't have hair at all, but feathers. If I hold my hand over those eyebrows and eyes and the feathers, it's just nose and mouth and chin, and it looks like me, even with the shiny bristled mustache. Like if I opened my mouth and talked in that room by myself, those lips and teeth and tongue would move too and tell me and only me things reflections in mirrors never do. He doesn't look like Marjorie at all. Marjorie says he doesn't look like any of us, that he looks old and dead and flat as a pancake. She says Daddy told her he was Poppy's Poppy, that he was my grandpa's grandpa. And when she says the word was, she says it like she thinks it matters a lot. He's not a person anymore, Elizabeth, she says. He lived a long, long time ago and he's gone. But he's here. He's right there between Daddy's old monitor, so old it doesn't have a touch screen and it's just like a TV, and the stack of books he never finishes. He's there, and I can tell he matters. Yesterday it rained. Marjorie didn't want to go outside, but the puddles were really good, and I asked and asked. Did you know how Grandma says the squeaky wheel, which means always ask? So Marjorie stood under the porch watching me, making sure I didn't fall into any of the puddles and disappear. She wasn't happy about it and sniffed a lot and pulled her sweater into her armpits. Finally, she just went in. I knew I wasn't going to fall down any puddles anyway. Not with Poppy's Poppy in the house. He was the reason when I fell off my training wheel bike and knocked out my front teeth that it hadn't been worse, that I hadn't died. I'm not stupid. I know about death. When Grandma goes to Poppy's grave, I know what it means. He's under the ground, like Miss Boodles, my turtle. I put her in a shoebox and Daddy played the harmonica and I put the dirt down myself, even if I felt like I wouldn't have wanted Miss Boodles to see me do it. Poppy's Poppy should have been dead. I knew that because Daddy said he was born exactly 100 years before I was, but Poppy's Poppy wasn't. He'd sat on tables and desks and even hung on the wall. He watched out for us, the sons of his sons, he said, except now there weren't any sons, just me and Marjorie. And he wanted us to know that that was okay, that he loved us too, that he'd keep us safe until we had sons of our own, that he had ways to keep us safe because he was a sorcerer. I danced in the rain, and I could almost see him peeking around the clouds, keeping me from falling down puddles into hell or coal mines or whatever. And then it wasn't raining enough, and the puddles were all splashed out. And I started to think about what if I did fall down a puddle and disappear, and Marjorie wasn't there to call the fire department or whatever. So I went in the back door by the garage, peeling my clothes off and feeling a little sore. And when I came through the door into Daddy's office, she was standing there, right there, holding Poppy's Poppy and looking at him like he was giving her that look, like he was saying something to her she didn't want to miss, which was wrong. And made me feel like somebody was poking me in my belly with a stick. Elizabeth, Marjorie was saying, have you been touching this? You mustn't touch it. I said no, because you have to say no to Marjorie when she says things like that. Don't be such a liar. I can see your fingerprints on it. She didn't say him. She said it. But I knew what she was thinking. I knew what she wanted. She wanted to take him away from me. She wanted him for herself. I got crafty. I told her, okay, that I wouldn't, but that she shouldn't touch him either because he was important to Daddy, that she should put Poppy's Poppy down. Now, I said. She made a squished bug face and slapped at me with the hand she wasn't using to hold Poppy's Poppy away from me. The door was still open behind us, and the rain started to pick up again. I thought of the puddles, and then I thought of Poppy's Poppy. He'd always protected us. I had to protect him. I planted my feet and I ducked under her arm and I grabbed him with both hands. The glass clanked against the frame in my hands. Marjorie slid on the water we'd tracked on the floor and fell out onto the cement, out onto where I lost my teeth. She fell backward and made an ugly sound. We had to go to the hospital. Poppy's Poppy says it's okay. I'm hugging him in his frame and nobody's telling me I shouldn't. Mama and Daddy are crying, but Poppy's Poppy says it will be okay. He's always taken care of us. Marjorie was never going to have sons. Not like my sons, he says. Of course not. Marjorie doesn't look like him at all.
Stoked for nominee Douglas Gwilym, everyone. Woo! All right, so do you want me to read something next, or do you want to read something? All right.
The reason for the season.
Reason for every season, right? All right. So I'm going to read at least the beginning, probably the whole thing. It's not that long. Of course, it's not that long. Foam and Yellow Sand, which originally appeared in Penumbra, which doesn't exist anymore. So this is the only place you can read it in this book, this new one right here. All right. Wet, gritty sand caked under Ellen's fingernails, and the surf tugged at her ankles as she dragged herself out of the water. Fragmented memories cascaded through her mind. Where was she? Why had she been in the ocean? Where was Nick? She raised her head and stared out at the endless blue expanse, and terror tugged at her belly. She remembered salty water filling her mouth, burning down into her lungs, its heavy resistance hampering every movement. A foam-topped wave rolled in, and spray misted her skin. She scrambled away from the water, over the hot yellow sand. Her rubbery, weak legs protested, but she ignored them. The wind caught the sound of voices, and she turned toward them. I now pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss your bride. Then a familiar voice. Who's that? Shouts and the sounds of running feet. The poor thing's stark naked. Faces swam around her and hot hands wrapped around her arms. And freezing. Give me your coat, sweetheart. A woman in a white dress pushed forward and wrapped a black jacket around Ellen's shoulders. Ellen clung to the woman as the scent of Nick's aftershave tugged at her mind like an undertow. The woman in white was solid and warm. She was the only one who seemed real. Help me, Ellen whispered. Her voice vanished into the burble around them, and the sound of the surf threatened to consume her. Oh, you poor thing. Of course we'll help you. Let's get you inside, the woman said. Stop. That familiar voice again. A woman. Grace? Ellen tried to focus. The world swam around her, and then her mother-in-law grabbed her shoulders. Grace's hands were ice cold, even through the jacket, and the world solidified around them. Oh my God, she shouted. It's Ellen. The woman in white froze. That's not possible. I swear it's her. Nick, come look. Ellen blinked. Nick was here. The crowd parted, and Ellen stared at her husband. Unfamiliar wrinkles crinkled the skin around his eyes, and silver strands shot through his black hair. A wave of possessive yearning filled her. She pulled away from Grace and stumbled toward him. He caught her. She buried her face in his chest, and his heartbeat drowned out the sound of the waves. What's going on? Ellen asked. You've been missing for 5 years. I thought everyone thought you'd drowned. Memories of blue-tinged blackness bubbled in the back of her mind, but she forced them down. Come on, we should get inside, the woman in white said. We can sort out everything later. Hold on to me, darling, Nick whispered, then picked her up. She breathed him in. He was solid and warm, real, and hers. She tried not to see the pain on the woman in white's face, tried not to recognize the wedding dress or notice the fact that Nick was missing the jacket to match his black tuxedo pants. She clung to Nick, and the feeling of his arms around her was enough. Nick carried her to Grace's suite and set her gently on the bed. He touched her cheek. I can't believe you're real, he whispered. You should go talk to Bianca, Grace said. I'll stay with Ellen. Ellen didn't want to stay with Grace. She didn't want to let Nick out of her sight. She clung to his hands. Let him go, Ellen. He'll be right back. Ellen's fingers relaxed, and Nick pulled away. He kissed her forehead. Ellen stared down at her traitorous hands. What was going on? She pulled the tuxedo jacket tight and wished for a robe. Grace sat next to Ellen, overwhelming her with a sense of baby powder and fresh perm. I'm sure you've realized what's going on. I interrupted Nick's wedding. Yes. The confirmation was a punch to her stomach. Grace patted her shoulder. Don't worry, dear. It's not too late to fix it. Nick loves you more than anything, and I'm sure you'll be able to win him back. Yes, I have to win him back. Nothing else mattered but Nick. Come, dear, let's get you dressed. You'll need to look your best. She pulled one of Ellen's dresses out of her suitcase, the floaty blue one, Nick's favorite. This should do nicely, don't you think? Ellen ran a finger along the soft, cedar-scented cotton. Why do you have this? That doesn't matter. Why don't you go get a shower and then get yourself made up? I'll lay this out for you. It does matter? What's going on, Grace? If you want to win Nick back, you're going to have to trust me, Ellen. Ellen didn't trust her. Tell me what's going on. You've been gone for years. Things have changed. Nick has changed. Without me, Bianca might be able to take him away from you. You don't want that, do you? I don't? She couldn't imagine living without Nick. Go get a shower. Ellen dried and curled her hair. The cosmetic spread on the sink matched her complexion and wouldn't have worked at all on Grace. The powder made her sneeze, and the lipstick was heavy and greasy. Grace dressed her like a doll, then led her down to dinner. Nick and Bianca sat at a small table together. The other guests were scattered around small round tables. Soft candlelight filled the room, and a string quartet played softly in a corner. This should be their wedding reception, Ellen said, pausing in the doorway. Doubts and questions swam in her mind. How had she missed 5 years? Why didn't she remember anything? What were the odds of her washing to shore here at the very moment of Nick's wedding? Grace squeezed her arm with fingers like icy bones. They shouldn't be having a wedding reception. Come on, dear. The command pulled her forward and drowned her thoughts. Nick stood up and hurried over to them. You look amazing. It's like you stepped right out of my dreams. He took her arm and led her to a seat next to Bianca, who'd changed out of her wedding dress. She looked up at Ellen and Nick, then quickly away. So, Ellen, where have you been for the past 5 years? Bianca asked. Grace and Nick both glared at her. Now's not the time, Nick whispered. I don't know where I've been. Memories sparked like sunlight on waves. I remember the plane, the noise it made as we fell, and the pilot repeating over and over to remain calm. Then after we crashed, the way the water rushed into the cabin, all white peaks and foam. We all scrambled for the rafts. I remember holding Nick's hand, but there was so much water. She remembered the salty tang of it in her mouth, remembered the moment that his hand pulled out of hers. She shook her head. It doesn't matter now, Nick said. We're all just glad that you're alive. Waiters brought each of them a salad. Ellen wasn't hungry. She couldn't remember what hunger felt like. I thought about calling your mother, but then I thought it might be better if you do that yourself, Nick said. She's living in a new place now, a little bungalow in the country. I think you'll like it. Ellen struggled to remember her mother's face, but the image was like a sandcastle in the surf, soft at the edges and collapsing. Nick took a bite of his salad and gave Bianca a pleading look. Ellen recognized that look. It was the one he used to give her when he couldn't think of anything to say. Bianca closed her eyes. What are you going to do now that you're back? She asked, her voice brittle with false friendliness. Nick told me you used to paint. I did? She remembered the scrape of the brush against canvas, capturing the fall of sunlight on bare skin. And I'm sure you want to catch up with your friends and family and everything. Nick is her family, Grace snapped. Ellen tried to think of the names of her old friends, or feel a desire to paint, or remember things she'd wanted other than Nick. The memories were there, distant and muted and faded, like old videos played on a black and white TV. But she couldn't feel anything. She looked at Nick. He was her anchor, her one thing that mattered. But what she felt for him wasn't love, it was ownership. And that possessive, greedy need made it hard to catch even the wispy memories of her feelings from before. She's going to have a rough time settling back into her life, and she needs someone to take care of her, Grace said. Mother's right, Nick said. She is going to need someone, and I am her family. Bianca stood up. Her chair clattered to the floor, and the quartet stopped playing. Everyone froze. The sound of the ocean filled the silence, and terror crept along Ellen's skin. I'm sorry, I can't do this, Bianca said. I just can't. She ran from the room, and Ellen was grateful for the noise of her shoes against the marble floor. Nick took Ellen's hand. I'm so sorry about all this, darling, but don't worry. I'll set it right. Everything will be just like before. You'll see. Grace smiled at Bianca's fleeing back. The waiters kept bringing food, and Ellen pushed it around her plate. Would you like something else? Nick asked. Ellen shook her head. I'm not hungry. I have to run to the bathroom. I'll be right back. He kissed her cheek before he walked away. His absence ached. Grace ran a cold finger along Ellen's cheek. I knew you were the key to getting rid of her.
What have you done to me? Ellen asked. Why don't I care about anything other than Nick? What else should you care about? He's your husband. I remember caring about other things. Grace sighed. He is the one thing in the world you want, and he's yours for the taking. Don't be a fool. Nick slid back into a seat. How are my two favorite ladies? I think Ellen looks a bit tired, don't you? Grace asked. You'd better get her to bed. Nick led Ellen to the honeymoon suite. Bianca's things were still inside, and he ran around, stuffing clothes into her suitcase while Ellen stood in the doorway. His hands hovered over the crumpled wedding dress, and he stopped. He pushed his fingers through his hair, and Ellen caught a glimpse of his confusion and pain. Why don't you go freshen up, and I'll deal with all this? Ellen nodded and went to the bathroom. She locked the door behind her. She stared at her reflection, pushed her hair back and bared her teeth and stuck her tongue out. She still had the scar on her cheek from when she fell off her bike as a kid. Her eyes were still just the same shade. She didn't have any extra wrinkles or gray hairs. Bianca's toiletries were neatly lined on the sink, her toothbrush and hairbrush and curling iron and a whole bag of makeup. Ellen flicked the curling iron on. The metal ticked as it heated. The plastic handle felt fake, like a thing in a dream. Ellen pressed the curling iron to her forearm. The hot metal hissed against her skin. The skin around the curling iron dried and cracked. Then a rivulet of yellow sand tumbled down her wrist and into the sink. Foamy seawater started to bubble up from the wound. She pulled the curling iron away. The gash looked just like a hole in the sand. Its edges crumbled. It was a relief to see proof of what she felt inside. Proof that she was dead. Proof that she was a monster. She looked out the window at the moonlight on the ocean. It was beautiful, and it filled her with terror. She didn't want to live, caring only about possessing one other person. She didn't want to be Grace's tool. She wanted to call her mother or paint or watch the sunrise over the ocean. But she only wanted one thing, and it was so hard to fight against that feeling. She turned on the shower and climbed out the window. The fall didn't even hurt. Oh my God, are you all right? Bianca rushed out of the shadows, then froze when she saw Ellen's face. Ellen? Bianca's eyes were red and her skin blotchy from crying, even in the weak light that spilled out of the hotel lobby. Promise me that you love him, Ellen said. I promise. Bianca held out her hand. What's going on? Are you okay? Ellen shook her head. No, but you can be. I think I can fix it. I shouldn't be here, Bianca. I'm sorry that I ruined your wedding day. She ran toward the ocean. Bianca screamed her name, but Ellen couldn't stop. She wouldn't have the courage to start again. Her feet splashed into the surf and dissolved. She fell forward, and water filled her mouth. It didn't taste like anything. Resilience, I think, is probably the most important thing to being a published author of any kind. Like I have almost 200 published stories now. It's getting real close. Over 190. Like I think if I said over 200, it might be a lie, but no one else is going to count. So I was like real tempted to just, but sure. But I have over almost 200 stories, but I also have almost 2,000 rejections. So like the one adds up faster than the other. And then even the stories that come out, like the story that came out, this one that I just read you guys in Penumbra, like, I don't know how many people have ever read it. It was a small press that didn't last very long. They did PDF ebooks, in like early mid 2000s, so even when you get stuff accepted, it's still hard because you still don't know if anybody's reading it unless somebody specifically comes up to you and says, I really love this story, which, if you did do that, like to any authors that like, if you know somebody
that writes and you like their stuff, tell them you like their stuff, because they don't know if you don't tell them. In fact, they probably assume you don't, because we're all pretty hard on ourselves. But I think resilience is the big thing. I'm very stubborn. It's like my core defining characteristic. And it's been helpful being stubborn. But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. And then since you're resilient, you have, you know, the ability to keep making yourself write. And the more you write, the better you get. Like, so Todd, who's here, published a couple of my other short story collections. I have a couple copies of my fantasy one and the science fiction one. And he read those, and then he read something that I'd written much later, and he was like, this is better. And I'm like, oh, good. Validation that I am improving. You know, never mind that your first impulse is to take that as actual validation that your old stuff was bad. Not that the new stuff is better. But, you know, you just keep swimming. You know, you just keep working at it, and you don't give up. Because it's much easier to give up than keep going.
Support the authors you love. And, you know, you think, well, what do you figure? 50 of the people who read a book actually do a review?
Maybe.
So if you think about it, you know, if 40 of the people do it and the author never sees a review, you're fanning the flames, you're keeping people going. If you love somebody's writing,
A lot of the
buy a
times,
review and word of mouth. If
yeah.
that's how these people keep writing, it's stuff.
A lot of the times it feels like you're just like screaming into the void,
Sure.
and like nothing comes back out. You're just, you know, throwing rocks in the ocean, and that's all the good it's doing you. But I do also love it, so that helps. Yeah. But on that note, Frank, you want to come read something?
Okay, so I'm gonna do old one when I wasn't nearly as good. So yeah, and this is a Pittsburgh story, and so which is I'm Frank Oreto. I live here. I own a bookstore. Yeah, I did. It's a good bookstore, and let's see. I've written a lot of stories. I've been in a number of anthologies, magazine of fantasy and science fiction. I have, and you know, I like writing stories. My daughter, more importantly, just sold her first story. She's 18, and she sits down and writes with me sometimes. And she sold a story to a professional rate-paying anthology, and yeah, called Midnight Diaries, I think. And I'm very, very proud of her. Okay, now I'm gonna read. She's going to bury me. Now enjoy that. So that's good. All right, this is called God, Bingo, and Pierogi. All right. Janice opened the ornately carved doors of St. Barnabas and slipped inside the cool, quiet sanctuary. She glanced up at the enormous face of Jesus staring down at her from over the pulpit, but didn't stop to pray. She was not here to worship. She was here because of her grandmother, our Baba, if you'd grown up in Pittsburgh South Side like Janice had. This church had been part of Baba's Trinity: God, Bingo, and Pierogi. God and Bingo Janice had come along for. The call and response of the liturgy always calmed her, made Janice believe for a moment there was a plan for the world and her life was a part of it. And Bingo could actually be fun. Not so much the game itself, but the stories Baba and others told over cigarettes and ham barbecue, stories they would never repeat in the house of God. The pierogi making, Janice had stayed away from. Baba had chided her, especially when things turned bad with Rob. She firmly believed good cooking made a good marriage. Come, make pierogi with us, she would say, reading the worried look on Janice's face. You feed your man, show him respect, and if that don't work so well, you feed him again. But the pierogi ladies scared Janice. They gathered every Wednesday, making hundreds of the potato and cheese-filled dumplings to sell for the church. As a child, she would peek into a large basement kitchen, watching them at their work. They'd seem too much like the crones from her fairy tales, speaking words Janice didn't understand and cackling with laughter. They seemed even more crone-like now, all wrinkles and sagging flesh, as Janice entered the church's kitchen. Condolences in both English and Polish washed over her as the women approached. We loved your Baba so much, you will be missed. They didn't ask why Janice hadn't been at the funeral. Quick glances at her closed right eye and swollen lip advertised the answer. Baba said Zofia should teach me to make pierogi, Janet said after the initial wave of conversation died away. For my husband. The women said nothing for a long moment, only exchanged thoughtful glances, as if years of cooking together had made speech unnecessary. Finally, Ava, a round-faced woman as wide as she was tall, nodded and took Janice's hand in her own. Of course, your Baba knew best. The crones led her to a long steel table at the rear of the room. Zofia, the oldest of them, stood alone, eyes white with cataracts, pressing dough into paper-thin circles. The women left Janice there and went back to their own mixing and shaping. Janice stood in silence, watching Zofia's rapid, dexterous movements. The woman's skin didn't sag like the others. Instead, it wrapped around her thin bones mummy tight. Fine wrinkles lined that skin like spidery letters in a language Janice couldn't decipher. Pregnant seconds ticked by. Was the old woman as deaf as she was blind? Janice wondered. Does she even know I'm here? Without warning, Zofia's flour-dusted hands rose. Her long, thin fingers probed Janice, somehow locating each spot where Rob had hit her. With each touch, the old woman's face grew darker. Zofia spoke in Polish. Janice only understood bits and pieces of the words. However, she knew what was required. Watch, listen, do what I do. So Zofia taught Janice to make pierogi, shaping dough, mixing the potato, onion, and cheese. Much of the process Janice was familiar with. She'd watched Baba perform the same steps 1,000 times in her tiny kitchen on Pius Street. But there were differences. A way of holding your left hand, 3 fingers splayed, 2 curled, as your right hand drew symbols in the scattered flour. And the words, harsh and jagged, completely unlike the Polish Janice grew up hearing. Words that made Janice's mouth tingle, as if she had eaten hot peppers, and once spoken, fled her mind completely. Janice felt dizzy. The dough burned her hands, and odd colors flowed over the filling. She saw Rob's face, his anger. She remembered the love she felt for him, once so huge and all-consuming, how his rage transformed those feelings to fear and despair, as miraculously as God's love transformed communion wine into blood. He's going to kill me one day, Baba. So Baba had told her what she needed to do. Janice wept, mourning the loss of her Baba, of her marriage. The hot tears flowed down her cheeks, adding themselves to the flour, eggs, and oil. Janice blinked away the tears to find Zofia's blind eyes upon her. Rough hands found hers, stopping their motion. Janice blinked again. Her mind tingled like a sleeping limb regaining circulation. A plate stacked with half-moon-shaped pierogi lay on the table before her. Zofia spoke for the first time in English. Not for you. As Janice walked from the church, the special pierogi covered with a napkin, she heard her Baba as clearly as if the dead woman walked beside her. You feed your man, show him respect. If it not work out so well, you feed him again. A week later, there was another funeral. This one, Janice did attend. That's the end.
All right. So you want to, yeah.
Okay, we should come up here. So
Are we on time?
we've discussed the lovely, where are we on time?
We're 51 minutes in, so we have like over an hour left. We have so much time. Please, Frank.
You've just done so many different things. I mean,
Okay,
you have
so
the flash fiction
Okay.
experiment.
all right, we'll talk about these. So well, okay, so we'll talk about me and we'll talk about resilience again. I talk about crowdfunding. So I do like Kickstarter campaigns for my books to self-publish them so that I can, have money to buy copies because, I don't know if you know this about short fiction, but it doesn't really pay very well. There's not a lot of money in it. Don't let the chat GTP tell you the otherwise. I don't know what those people are doing. But so the first thing I ever tried to do crowdfunding wise is I tried to fund an anthology of like optimistic science fiction and fantasy that I would edit, because this was back when I was editing Triangulation. So I was, wearing my editorial hat. And I was like, yeah, it'll just be good for the community. I can pay other people pro rates and I'll get money and it'll be great. And this was before anybody else had really done Kickstarter funded anthologies, which is totally normal now. But when I did it, people were like, but why would you do that? And so it just failed utterly. Whew, crashed and burned. I mean, I actually got a decent amount of money, but not nearly as much as I needed to actually make it happen. So I learned some valuable lessons. And for the next thing I did, I scaled it back a bit, like way less ambitious, way less, trying to make it bigger than myself. And I was just like, you know what? I want to make a flash fiction collection because, again, I don't know if you know this, but there's not a lot of respect for flash fiction out there. Doesn't usually win awards. Since it's short, it makes you even less money.
But it's such a fun,
but it's fun,
form.
and I love it.
Everybody loves you.
So
Told a story in a single setting.
So I did a Kickstarter for my first flash fiction collection. I've got 2 now, the other one's over there as well. And I wrote 1 flash fiction story a month for a year and sent them out to the backers by email. And a couple times people would respond and tell me they liked them, which made me very happy. So if you've ever done that, anybody on the internet or here in person, it does mean a lot. It makes me happy every time. And I did prompts. So like if you gave me a certain amount of money, you could tell me what story you wanted me to write for you. And then I would have to try to write your prompt in 1,000 words. And like, I got some good ones. Let's see. Like our friends, so me, Douglas, and Frank used to all go to the same writing group. And we had another friend named Vince who backed this and gave me a story where he wanted me to write a story about a sympathetic misogynist character because I often accused him of misogyny in his fiction. And he was like, show me how it's done. And I'm like, not with misogyny, bro, but I did my best. So like somebody asked for a creepy story. I mean, somebody asked for a story about a zombie shark. So there's a story about a zombie shark in here. No, we're not reading from this book. We're reading from the other books. This is the old book. If you want to read the books in this and you don't already, if you want to read stories from this one, you don't already have it, buy a copy. You probably already have it. But if you haven't read it, you should read it and then you should review it on the internet. Tell all your friends. But yes, I have 2 flash fiction collections. They were both funded on Kickstarter, and I'll probably eventually do a 3rd one. There's like 10 years between the 2 of them because, sometimes I need time to recover after I do things. Writing a flash fiction story every month for a year isn't that onerous of a task, but it does mean that I have like constant deadlines, and that can get a little old. But this one also has, so my mom reads my stuff. I don't know if she came to the Zoom today. If you're here, Mom, hi. She's probably not here because their internet's very bad. But if she is here, I'm very grateful to my mom because she does read my stuff and she does tell me she likes it. And this book has a series that's like her favorite thing that I've done maybe ever. It's definitely high on the list. Where for a while on my website, when I was posting fiction to my website, I did a series of flash fiction pieces that were like connected, and they are this Martian adventure story. So like all of them are in here, and they're just 2 like middle school, high school kids growing up on Mars, and I do think they're cute and my mom likes them. So this book, if you want to read something my mom likes.
What do you think about asking? See, are there questions?
No. Okay.
Anybody?
So, well, we could read something. We do more readings.
We could. I want to
I
hear you talk about your novel a little bit,
okay.
even though it's not here.
I do have 1 copy.
You do have one.
It's actually, this is like one of the only copies because this is currently out of print. One of my friends who again might be in the Zoom is supposed to be doing a new cover for me. So when I get a new cover, I'm going to republish it myself because this was out for 5 years and then the publisher did not renew the contract, and that's okay. I'm excited to put it out myself. So I have this weird theme in my writing with bodily fluids, specifically blood. Like I do lots of things with blood. It comes up a lot. Like there's blood in this one. There's blood in the title of one of the other ones. There's just, I don't know why. It's a weird through line, but it does show up a lot. And I've noticed this about myself. But in Left Hand Gods, people who are left-handed, which I am not, so I'm not special in my own world. But if you're left-handed, you can use your blood to do magic because you're blessed by the gods. Like your blood itself is blessed by the gods, and you burn it to do magic. And the main character is from a country that used to be an empire that now has like a blasted wasteland in the middle of it because of essentially a magic nuclear accident. So magic is forbidden where she lives. So if you're found to be left-handed, they burn you at the beginning of this book. Spoilers, by the end, they've stopped that because that's really horrific. And like things improve in my books generally. But it's got magic horses because I am a horse girl. I have like, I don't know if you could tell my little shirt here, I've got unicorns on it. There's a whole thing. But it's got magic horses and it's got dragons and like a stupid amount of banter. Like when I was writing this, there was a whole scene where one of the old men characters in the dragon just wouldn't stop bantering. But I thought it was a lot of fun to write. Hopefully it's a lot of fun to read. Again, hopefully coming soon to probably Kickstarter. And but I do love the original cover. Like it is beautiful. But you know, you gotta move forward, right? And you can't just repeat yourself over and over again. So my friend who is doing the cover for me, her name is Betsy. I'm gonna say Bodemer because I think she kept her maiden name for her art, like I kept my maiden name for my writing. And you should check her out. If you Google her, you'll probably find it. She's on Instagram. She does pyrography, so she does like wood burning. And her stuff's beautiful. She makes like the coolest spoons and like cutting boards and like all kinds of stuff. But she also does like some more designy book covery stuff. And that's, in fact, speaking of the other blood book, she did the cover for this book. This is a painting that she did for me, and I have a copy of, well, I have the original on my wall. Read the title. Okay, so the title is The Blood of Four Gods and Other Stories. Again, blood and gods, and it's a weird theme. But if you like those things, I am the author for you, apparently. I'm going to read my story from Novus Monstrum, at least the beginning of it. I don't know if I'm going to read the whole thing. I don't know how I'm going to feel halfway through. Probably read the whole thing. Again, as I mentioned, it's not that long. So, Novus Monstrum, as you might guess from the title, is about original monsters. So you had to come up with a monster that wasn't already extant. So no werewolves, no, vampires, no, classic monsters, no Godzilla. And for some reason, when I decided I was going to write a story for this anthology that my friend was editing, that I knew if I was going to get into had to be real good, I was thinking about birds because birds are scary. One of my friends has a parrot, and like I am constantly afraid that thing's gonna like bite my finger off. So this is called Unsubscribe Bird Facts. Hector wished rich people still wore feathered hats. Other stupid things kept coming back into fashion, but the goddamn Audubon Society had permanently ruined the feather trade. So Hector was stuck dealing with live exotic birds. There's some swearing in this, just warning you guys, it's coming right now. He fucking hated birds. They were loud, they shit all over everything. He was happy to see the last of every parrot he stuffed into an empty plastic bottle and sent on its way. But the money was too good to quit. His girl crept along overhead, inching toward a nest with 2 precious eggs inside. "Hurry up," he shouted up at her, batting at the cloud of mosquitoes that flitted around his head. Sweat plastered his shirt to his chest, and the sun was getting high overhead. "The football match starts soon." She slipped, caught herself, and finally managed to get the eggs and secure them in a specifically designed pouch on her chest. She slipped again, coming down from the tree, and landed hard on the root-choked ground. Not on the eggs, though, so that was something. She whimpered and rubbed her flat little ass as she got back on her feet. Hector sighed. He should have picked a different kid. He'd been a much better climber at her age, and his father would never have put up with all the whining this girl did. He'd plucked her from her nest just like a bird, from a family who looked like they had enough kids not to miss one, and who certainly didn't have the money to pay anyone to care about getting her back. It hadn't been terribly difficult securing a kid to climb trees and clean up bird shit, but it had been enough of a pain that it wasn't worth it to abandon her out in the jungle and get a replacement. That didn't mean he wasn't tempted sometimes. Hurry up, he snapped. I want those eggs in the incubator and a beer in my hand before kickoff. Look, Papa, there's another nest over there, she said, pointing behind him, on the ground. She darted around him and ran away through the trees. He thought about leaving her, letting her find her own way back home, but those were hyacinth macaw eggs she'd just snatched. Those would buy him the fancy new 4K TV he'd been eyeing. He caught up to see her clambering over the sides of a huge nest. It was more than waist high on his girl, made of mud and sticks and lined with downy feathers. There was a single large egg nestled inside. It was huge, easily the biggest egg Hector had ever seen. Big as an ostrich egg, easy, maybe bigger. His girl lifted it and staggered under its weight. What kind of bird is this, Papa? Hector wasn't sure, but any bird he'd never seen before was certainly a rare one, and if there was one thing he could count on rich assholes to pay for, it was a rarity. He reached out and patted his girl's head. I'm not sure, but we'll find out. Now let's go. He definitely didn't want to still be around when the egg's mama came back. That thing was probably dangerous. Hector researched for weeks and wasn't able to find any leads on what the egg might be. He tried to go back to the nest to set up a camera, but he couldn't find the damn thing. A nest that big didn't just melt into nothing. He must have misremembered the spot. Maybe I can help research, his girl said, sitting next to the incubator he jury-rigged for the massive egg. I heard about this phone app that tells you about birds. Hector didn't trust her with a phone of her own, and she'd given up asking. Please, Papa, it won't interfere with any of my chores, I swear. He slid his phone toward her, but kept his hand on it. You'll muck up the back shed and deep clean the food storage. His girl nodded, and he let her take the phone. In seconds, she had his phone randomly chiming in with bird facts. The harpy eagle is a large bird of prey, native to tropical forests throughout Central and South America. They have a recorded lift capacity of up to 40 pounds. Harpy eagle talons can crush bones with ease. Did you hear that? His girl asked, patting the egg. I'll bet you'll be able to lift 40 pounds and crush bone. It's not a harpy eagle, Hector said. Eggs too big and they don't nest on the ground. Maybe you'll be even bigger and stronger, his girl said, still patting the egg. Her face looked eerie, lit by the glow of Hector's phone. She'd better not be getting attached. That damn thing was his ticket to retirement. His phone chimed. The 6-inch-long Gocopolos large ground finch has the strongest bite of any bird in relation to its body size. Its thick beak packs an impressive 70 newtons of force. What's 70 newtons of force? His girl asked. Hector sighed. I have no idea. Is it enough to crush bone too? Hector's father would have smacked him if he chattered so much. This girl was lucky he was a kinder man. Finches eat nuts and seeds. His girl pressed her cheek against the egg. I bet you'll be able to crush bones with your beak and talons, she said. Hector rolled his eyes. That bird was going straight to a collector, no matter what it could do. His girl was spending more and more time with the egg, but she was still getting her chores done, along with the extra he piled on for phone access, so Hector decided to allow it. She repeated her stupid bird facts to the egg in an encouraging tone. Crows' brain-to-body ratio equals that of great apes and cetaceans. They can make and customize tools, reason, understand causality, count to 5, and remember human faces. The Australian wedge-tailed eagle has the greatest visual acuity of any known animal.
African gray parrots can perform some cognitive tasks at levels beyond that of a 5-year-old human. The peregrine falcon is the world's fastest animal and can reach speeds of 186 miles an hour. Eagles can see clearly about 8 times as far as humans can, allowing them to spot a rabbit at a distance of 2 miles. After each fact, she'd say how she was sure the egg would be able to do that too, her tone cheerful and encouraging. How his girl expected one bird to be able to match all those things was beyond Hector. He figured it had to be some kind of big, flightless ground bird, a remnant of the age of terror birds. It certainly wouldn't be smarter than both a crow and African gray parrot combined, faster than a falcon, able to see better than an eagle, stronger than both the harpy eagle and Galapagos finch, also combined, like his girl insisted. What birds have the prettiest feathers, Papa? His girl asked. Hector thought longingly of fancy hats. Quetzals, he said, infusing his voice with just as much authority as his phone's chipper declarations. And which ones have the prettiest songs? Wood thrushes, certainly not parrots with their ear-splitting squawking. He'd never understand why people wanted these things as pets. Then I'm sure our bird will be as pretty as the quetzal and sing even better than a wood thrush. We won't be keeping it, he said. He was thinking about auctioning it off. That seemed the best way to drive the price up. But I found it, his girl said. It's mine. You don't own any of this, girl. You work for me, and I give you food and shelter. But this one's different, she insisted. Can't you feel it? Hector did sometimes feel something when he looked at the egg. He told himself it was anticipation, that he was looking forward to his big payday. But sometimes it felt more like fear. It's a unique egg, but it's still just an egg. No, it's special, and I love it, and it loves me. Birds don't have feelings. 90% of birds mate for life. Hector took a deep breath. He was not his father. He was not going to hit his girl. It's not about feelings. It's about reproduction. Animals aren't people, and you can't assign them human feelings. But my egg is different, and I know it. She stamped her foot in emphasis. That's it. I'm taking away your phone privileges. Don't let me lock you in the basement without dinner again. My real parents would never lock me in the basement, she muttered. Rage flared in Hector's chest, hot and dangerous. He thought he'd broken her of mentioning her real parents. Maybe not, but they didn't want you, and you're never going to see them again. I'm all you have, kid. She shook her head. I have my egg now. He picked up his phone, holding her gaze as he unlocked it. He'd vowed to never hit her, but that didn't mean he couldn't hurt her. Unsubscribe bird facts. She glared at him, blinking back tears. I hate you. I hope my egg hatches and my bird eats you. We're selling it, and that's that. There's nothing you can do about it. The egg gave a sharp crack, and a wave of ridiculous fear rippled down Hector's spine. He firmly reminded himself that baby birds were helpless creatures no matter how big their eggs were. His girl rushed to the egg. She grabbed it and ran, carrying out into the sunny yard, then watched it push out of its shell with a look of pure adoration. Hector lunged after them, but staggered to a stop. The bird wasn't worth anything to him dead. Put it down, he snapped. Baby birds were always ugly, covered in amniotic fluid and dull downy feathers, awkwardly sized, clumsy, loud. This bird did look like that, but it didn't look right. Its proportions were all wrong for the flightless ground bird that Hector knew it had to be based on the size of the egg. It looked up at his girl, holding it in her arms, and if Hector didn't know better, he'd have thought he saw her adoration reflected in its bright yellow, almost human eyes. Hector stepped forward, his hands curled into fist. She'd pushed him too far this time. No one would blame him for hitting her over this. Then, between one heartbeat and the next, the bird grew. Dazzling blue-green feathers sprouted along its wings that unfurled to staggering size. razor-sharp talons sank into the dirt as it snapped its wings out to its full 30-foot wingspan, pushing the heavy jungle air into a gale that shoved Hector back a step. Its wickedly hooked, heavy beak gleamed like obsidian. The bird towered over Hector, blocking out the sun and obscuring his girl completely. No living bird was that big. Hector wasn't sure any bird ever had been so big. Its wings would dwarf a goddamn semi-truck. It regarded Hector with terrifying intelligence and let it in an incongruous, thrush-like trill. It was a pretty sound, maybe even prettier than a wood thrush's song. More blue-green feathers glistened in an elegant crest on its head, and the plumage on its chest was a brilliant ruby red. "Look at you," his girl whispered, ducking under the bird's massive wing and running her fingers along a glorious feather. "You look just like I'd imagined. You're so beautiful." Its feathers really were stunning, but Hector was pretty sure that even if feathered hats did come back into fashion, no one would be collecting any from this monster. He had a gun, but it was in the Jeep. There was nothing to defend himself with in the building behind him. There'd never been any need for it. He felt tiny and helpless standing there looking up at it. Fuck, he really hated birds. And he should have just left his girl to be a dirt farmer with the rest of her family. "Get away from that bird," Hector said, his knees shaking. He glanced from the bird to his girl, who looked happier than he'd ever seen her. Stupid kid. That thing could disembowel her as easy as look at her. She looked at him, then back at her bird. "Did my parents really give me to you?" she asked. "Of course they did," Hector snapped. The bird tilted its head, regarding him steadily. It let out another soft trill. The lovely sound froze Hector's blood in his veins. The girl kept petting the damn bird, and it leaned into her touch. Some species of birds are known as brood parasites. They lay eggs in other birds' nests and force their other birds to raise their young. At first, I wondered if that's what I was. I thought maybe my parents forced you to take me, and that's why you were so mean. But I don't think that's it. I think you stole me, just like you steal eggs. But this egg was mine. You didn't find it. You didn't take it. I did." "By that logic, then you're mine too," Hector snarled. He felt like a rat under the bird's gaze, and fear and anger and shame all curdled together in his belly. He wanted to run. He wanted to drag his girl back into the shed and beat her with his belt, like his father had when he talked back. He wanted to make sure the stupid bird didn't kill her. He wanted the money this insane thing had to be worth. The girl shook her head. "There's one important difference. I love him, and you've never loved me." She caressed the red patch on the bird's chest, then stepped aside. "I want to see if he can crush bones." The bird lunged forward, almost faster than Hector could see. Its beak closed around his wrist with a sharp click. It sliced through his bones like they weren't even there, too fast for him to even feel. The pain came a heartbeat later, and Hector screamed as his hand vanished down the bird's throat. "Good boy," his girl crooned. "Let's see what else you can do." Hector fled, stumbling away, clutching his bleeding stump to his chest. There was no sound of wing beats behind him. Maybe he'd make it to the Jeep, get the gun, stuff the bird and sell that. Stuff and sell the girl too. A sob ripped out of his chest. His phone chimed in his pocket. "We hope you enjoyed bird facts. Here's one final fact as our farewell. Owl feathers have a unique shape that funnels air smoothly over the wings and dampens the sound, allowing them to fly almost silently. Goodbye." One of them. But yeah, so any questions, any follow-ups, or do we want to move on to either Frank or Pete reading us another story?
I could do something short. I could either read the beginning of the Novus Monstrum story, or I could read, like one of my one-pagers.
Read the beginning of your Novus Monstrum story.
Since
I love Frank's Novus Monstrum story. Like, I like all of Frank's stuff. Like I like both of their stuff. I am a bit of a fangirl and I really enjoy like when my friends are awesome. But Frank's story in Noah's Monster is so good. You can
Okay. Now it's all built up. It's really terrible. No, and I won't even try. But I'll read some of it. But I am going to read from the beginning because I like to read from the beginning. All right, let's go to work. All right, this story is called "God Damn You to Hell, John Glenn" by me, Frank J. Oreto. Edie burst through the front door like an 8-year-old ball of lightning. I want to explain something with that. So I've been writing for a while, and I've been writing most of that time with my friend here, Douglas Gwilym. And what you don't maybe know about Douglas is he has a different name also, which is Pete. Peter Douglas Gwilym, or Williams. And but I'm not very good with names, and so every story I write, pretty much from the first story till now, has Pete as a character. Now sometimes I'll change it, to a different name. Yeah. And you got, other good things once at least happen. So in between crucifixions and etc. All right. Anyway. So I just wanted to mention that because I think it's funny. All right. Petey burst through the front door like an 8-year-old ball of lightning. Mom, wait till you hear. Wait till you hear. Suzanne looked up from the stack of ungraded trigonometry tests to the Cheshire Cat wall clock, 2:30. Gerald had promised 5 p.m. She put down her red pen and tried to force all annoyance from her face. I saw a launch, a real live Apollo rocket launch. Dad and me got up at 4 goddamn a.m. Suzanne took her boy in her arms. That's not appropriate language. Petey's face clouded for a moment. It's okay between us men. Dad said so. Well, don't say it around us moms. How was the rocket? So loud. Petey let loose his best rocket roar. Oh my gosh, so loud. And I met an astronaut. I bet you did. Petey's father, Gerald, liked astronauts. He liked to go out to bars with them and hit on the women they drew like flies. Astronauts were one reason Gerald was Suzanne's ex-husband. And you know what, Mommy? You know what? Gerald pushed through the front door. In his arms, he carried Petey's overnight bag, along with a large glass box. The astronaut gave me space monkeys. I got a clear spot. I'm clearing the spot, Dad. Petey wiggled out of his mother's embrace and raced to his room, leaving the two adults staring at each other. Hey, Susie, I just said hi to Harry and Eugenia next door. I actually kind of miss them. You said you'd keep Petey until goddamn 5 o'clock. Oh, come on, Suze. There's no need to. Don't worry. It's okay to talk that way between us men. Petey said so. The launch was pretty damned early, but he was so excited. You're pretty damned early. I plan my work around the times we agree on. I know, I'm sorry. I have to get back to the Cape. There's a press junket thing. Sure, I get it. Dinner, drinks, the grind never ceases. Dad, I cleared a spot. Where are you? Petey's excitement verged on hysteria. Duty calls. Wait a second, is that an aquarium? You can't just bring pets. But Gerald was already past her and stepping into Petey's room. Gerald worked for NASA in media relations, a job you rarely associate with the space program, but it was a job that let you give the son you only saw 1 weekend a month every official NASA-themed hat, t-shirt, toy, and now space monkeys? I earn a master's in mathematics and teach 10th grade trig. He barely scrapes a BS in communication and works for the space program. The world is a stupid place. And now, if I go in that bedroom and say, Petey, you can't just have a new pet without asking, I am the giant monster bitch versus his superhero rocket launching astronaut befriending dad. Voices came from Petey's room. We can fill it up in the bathtub. Okay, monster bitch it is. She muttered. Suzanne was waiting when father and son came back into Petey's room carrying the half-filled aquarium. Wait, no one asked me if you could have an aquarium in your room. Dad said it was okay, Petey said as if this settled things. Your dad doesn't live here anymore. Her words were like a slap. Petey's excitement evaporated, replaced with barely held back tears. Monster bitch. Suzanne kneeled so she was face to face with her son. Sweetheart, I need to talk to Daddy alone for a few minutes. Go in the kitchen and have some tang, okay? Of course, Petey looked to his father. Do what your mother says, son. The boy sniffled and walked out of the room. But space monkeys, he said in a sad, barely audible voice. Suzanne turned on her husband. You can't make decisions like this without talking to me first. Gerald put the aquarium on top of the chest of drawers Petey had cleared off, then sat down on his son's bed. He patted a spot beside him. Suzanne did not move. Fine. I know you don't like me getting him things. Oh, screw you, Gerald, Suzanne hissed, the words in a stage whisper she hoped didn't carry to the kitchen. That is so unfair. She gestured toward the room, around the room. A poster of the Apollo moon landing crew hung on the wall, signed by all 3 crew members. In the corner by the closet, a 4-foot-tall Apollo 6 replica stood poised for takeoff. Yes, I don't appreciate always being the Grinch to your Santa Claus, but pets are different. Are you planning to drop off a surprise pony next time? Gerald spread his palms in a calming gesture that made Suzanne want to kick him in his khaki-covered shin. I get you. I've been trying to cut down on the presents. You know, let spending time with Petey be the present. But why? That's why we went to the launch. Even got to look into ground control. Suzanne felt the anger fade a bit. Maybe Gerald had listened a little over the last half dozen arguments. This whole space monkey thing wasn't my fault. It was John, John Glenn. Suzanne knew John. She'd met him a few times in the last days of her marriage. So John was the astronaut Petey met? Yeah, it's really not a big deal. They'll all be dead in a month. Geez, I'm not surprised. Explaining this well. You ever heard of sea monkeys? Suzanne shook her head. Wait a second. Gerald grabbed a Fantastic Four comic from a stack on Petey's nightstand and flipped through the pages. Here. He held up a full-page advertisement showing a family of pink cartoon fish people, complete with webbed hands and stubby antennae. Above them, the ad proclaimed, "Enter the wonderful world of amazing live sea monkeys. Own a bowl full of happiness." I think I needed a little more explanation. This is what John gave him. They're brine shrimp. So small you can barely see them, even when they're full grown. You pour the brine shrimp eggs into some water along with a little food. In a couple of days, you got your sea monkeys swimming around. Feed them once a week and they last for a couple of months. Petey called them space monkeys. Well, yeah, the eggs are good for experiments, so they took some of them on a few Apollo flights. Let them get frizzled with cosmic rays to see what happened. They aren't radioactive or anything. Oh, no, nothing like that. The scientists hatched a bunch of them when they got back to Earth. They turned out just regular old brine shrimp, maybe an extra set of legs or two. So John got permission to give a few batches of the unhatched eggs to kids. Calls them space monkeys because he's John. What was I supposed to do? Suzanne sat down on the bed next to her husband. I know you have a hard time saying no. They last a couple of months. That's it. If you're lucky. Once they're gone, you can throw out the aquarium. Better yet, get to give a kid a goldfish. Suzanne looked at the aquarium sitting on the dresser. She tried not to imagine a badly thrown baseball crashing through the glass and water cascading over Petey's clothes. All right, he did get them from a real live astronaut. Let's give Boyo the good news. All right, that's all I'm going to read. But things don't go well with the space, as you may imagine.
Do we have any questions?
Congratulations, Jamie.
Thank you. Howdy back to North Carolina. Okay, well, yes.
No.
Okay. So one of my friends one Christmas got me a masterclass subscription to all the master classes. And I did one that wasn't very good. And then I didn't do a whole bunch for a while. And then I did Neil Gaiman's, which was very good. And he talked about ideas in a way that I thought really resonated with me. And that there aren't any really new ideas out there. People have been telling stories for so long that pretty much everything's been done. But the best way to do it is to pay attention to the world around you and then pick two things that don't necessarily fit together and smash them together. And, you know, something new forms. And I like, that's not how he said it. He was way more eloquent and with an accent. But I thought that was like a nice way to kind of put it. It was like you take separate things and you combine them. And by combining them is how you like come up with something original. And since, you know, like they talk about voice and, you know, like individual, you know, tone and things like, you know, because like if you read something by, say, Stephen King, and then you go read something by like N.K. Jemisin, like you'll know that they're not by the same person. You'll be able to tell, like you'll probably be able to guess which one's which. And so like, you know, I write fantasy and science fiction with this smattering of horror in there. Not much of my stuff is really pulled from my life. I don't find my life super interesting to write about. I took a creative nonfiction class in college and I did not particularly enjoy it. Also, I was in college and had like lived for, you know, approximately 17 seconds at that time. But I don't pull from my own life, from my stories, but you still pull from your experiences and what you're doing and what you're interested in. You know, like my friend's parrot kind of inspired the bird backstory, and like, you know, just different things coming up. Like I think there's a story in here called The Spider's Garden that I think was inspired by my deck. Like I was just sitting out on my deck looking at the things that I saw. Like I mentioned, the Shadows on Glass was an NPR story about glass plate photography. And like, I think in the NPR story, they mentioned that like nobody wanted these pictures. Like they were awful pictures of awful things etched in the glass and nobody wanted them. And eventually they just used them for other things. Like they used the glass as glass instead of as glass plates, you know? And so at the end of the story, spoilers, they built a greenhouse out of the glass plates as sort of a, you know, metaphor for moving on from your trauma and trying to not let it define you. So yeah, everywhere is where I get my ideas. All around. Ideas are everywhere. All right, well, if there aren't any questions at the moment, I could read something else. I just mentioned that story that I was inspired by my deck. It's very short. On page 27 of my new book. You don't have a copy yet. If you do have a copy, you could read along, I guess. So this is The Spider's Garden. It originally appeared in Daily Science Fiction, and it is quite short. The spider grows invasive plants in her garden. Morning glory crawls up the walls, its leaves green and glossy, its tendrils curling into brick and crumbling it slowly to dust. Mint and lily of the valley choke each other in shady corners. Forsythia hedges stand under the weight of creeping kudzu vines. The spider spins her webs and catches insects that venture into her domain. She wraps them in sticky thread and bites them. Her venom flows into their bodies, altering them, shaping them to her will. Then she lets them go. Once she would have devoured them, pulled them into her body to use them as a part of herself. But that is no longer necessary. One day, a young buck finds her garden. It ventures inside, each step carefully placed, its brown eyes wide and watching for any dangers. The spider admires the smooth brown of his coat, the feathery velvet of his new antlers. She's unsure of her venom's ability to change him. He is so much larger than she is. Still, she drops down behind one twitching ear and bites. Her fangs sink through fur and skin, barely pricking the flesh beyond. The deer's ear flicks at her, and he takes 2 jittery steps. She injects all the venom that she has, then lets go, lets her silken thread carry her back to the safety of the wall. Days pass before the deer returns, more than long enough for her body to produce all the venom she can store. He is calmer now, more confident within the garden's walls. She bites him again. Soon, he is coming every morning in the gray dawn and standing perfectly still when she bites him. The next creature to venture into her garden is a cat. It is large and long-furred,
with alert green eyes and dangerous claws and teeth. The spider considers just letting it leave, staying out of its reach, up in a delicate web stretched between two closed morning glory blossoms. But it is so much smaller than the deer, and the spider enjoys the challenge. The cat strolls along below her, stopping to dig into the soft soil around the mint, batting at a brown-edged fallen leaf. It flops onto its side in a pool of sunlight, and its eyes fall onto the spider, perched at the edge of her web. She shudders under its regard, but eventually its eyes slip closed and it twists onto its back. The spider considers its exposed belly. Its vulnerability is almost certainly a trap. She was once a predator too. She knows all about luring prey to its doom. Still. She drops down from the web, suspended on a silken thread. She pauses, just outside of easy reach. The cat remains still, its position relaxed and boneless, its eyes closed, its ears motionless. The moment stretches, as thin and fragile as her thread. She drops and burrows into long fur and bites. Its back legs rake toward her, take one hard swipe. One of her legs rips away, but it is done. She lets go and climbs. The cat jumps after her, swiping now with reaching front claws, but she is fast and small, and it is already changing. She settles back into her web and it licks its extended leg between each clawed toe and casually scrubs at its ears. Then it flops down again in its pool of sunshine. The spider is pleased. The cat is a good addition to the garden, and her leg will grow back. Her reach spreads one creature at a time. The cat brings mice and moles and shrews and birds into the garden, stunned and terrified, but still alive. The deer, his antlers rubbed smooth and shiny, leads his herd to her. A swarm of wasps build a papery nest in one corner. When new wasps are born, they are already hers. She surveys her domain and is pleased. The daylight hours grow shorter, and nights grow cold. Her creatures crowd into the garden, sharing the heat of their bodies and breath. The spider connects each of them with strands of sticky webbing, spins a thick cocoon in the very heart of her garden. As the gray clouds spit the first snowflakes, she climbs inside. She dreams of long summer days and wakes as 1,000 daughters who will claim 1,000 gardens.
All right, so any more questions?
I have a question for actually for all three of you. What do you like the most about it? I know you're all fantastic.
So it is really wonderful to read stories by people that you like also like the story. Like it sort of just for me adds this whole dimension of like he I know and like this person and they know and like me and this story is so good. So that's definitely part of it. And then just being able to get support from people who are like going through the same things that you're going through, people who aren't submitting short fiction do not get rejected in the same way, like people who are on a daily basis. So it's nice to have that.
Yeah, whether or not on a sometimes daily basis, depending on how many stories you have out in the world. You want to do that alone. You need somebody else and you can say, this happened to me. They said it was the best story they'd ever read in their lives and it changed them deeply and they said no. Then you just bang your tickets over half an hour and tell your dear friends who talk you down and get you to send another one.
I mean, when I was reading Slush for Clarkshire, I rejected somebody who was like kind of a big name and I'd heard of, and like this was years ago, and I went to Neil Clark and I'm like, do you want me to pass this up to you? And he's like, well, is it good? And I'm like, no. And he's like, rejected. I'm like, cool. So everybody gets rejected.
The thing about community too is you learn that it's not a person. you learn that it's.
Slush reading helps a lot with
that
that.
you have to treat every anthology, every magazine edition, like these people who are creating these things are artists themselves, like you, the writer.
And it is so
And
subjective.
they have a vision for it. And they're doing their best to fulfill their vision. And if what you said is genius, doesn't fit their vision, it's not gonna get it.
All right, Frank, how about you? You haven't talked yet.
I hate to keep that.
Oh, okay.
You know, it's weird. I mean, we all write a lot, right? We all write in little dark, semi-dark rooms all by ourselves, but you know, it's who you talk to about it because no one else understands it enough. It also makes us very boring when we get to, because we get together, that's all we ever talk about
Mhm.
is what we're working on, what we do, who rejected us, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, I talk to other people about writing, and some of them are like, why? And other people are like, oh my God, you were able to put together words? Oh my, and it's like, neither is very, very satisfying. Is you meet people you can talk about what you're doing. And who can tell you, oh, well, that's kind of sucky, actually, or that's really good.
And getting critiques from people is also very helpful.
Nice. Getting critiques from people whose work you respect. Is pretty key.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Plunge yourself in some random writer's group. But if you're not enjoying the writing of these other people, you know, I mean, they may have something to say you're gonna miss, and they may not understand what you're trying to do at all, and may give you ridiculous advice. So find people who get it, and people you respect, if you're trying to. I was lucky with that.
All right, any other questions? Yes.
What's on the 2024 horizon? You turned around from rejections to moving forward.
Well, okay, so Pete wanted me to wave my books around.
No, wait,
All right, so this is my Romeo and Juliet body swap comedy novelette, where Romeo and Juliet start body swapping and it changes the course of the story. It's also written in a limited third person point of view, so like that also changes the story because, you know, Shakespeare did not do limited third person point of view. So I just finished a companion novelette to this one where I did Much Ado About Nothing with soulmate identifying marks. It's so dumb. I love it so much. Like, yeah, so it's like the soulmates were like, it's not the first words they say to each other, it's the words that they say when you realize you're in love with them. So they gave me a little wiggle room with Beatrice and Benedict. But so I've just finished that. That was my NaNoWriMo project because I didn't want to do a full novel because I do not have 50,000 words in a month. I respect everyone who can do it. I cannot. It burns me out and makes me sad. But I did manage to do, 17,000 word novelette. So I have that I am probably going to self-publish because honestly, who wants to publish Much Ado About Nothing, weird fanfic thing. So that is on the horizon. I'm doing a horror anthology or horror collection. I put the stories together. I'm, working on, like, I've picked out what I think the title story is going to be, what I think I want to use for the cover. There's an artist that I will have to, pay money to use her cover, but I like it. And it is creepier than this one, which is important. And I have to wait until October next year because I want to use the story from Novus Monstrum, but I can't use it for a year. So I'm gotta wait for that exclusivity to expire. But that's probably going to be next October.
You don't have Forrest Gone here, and that's one that people bring up to me. When you come up, it's, oh, I love it.
I also love Forrest Gone. So that is a novella. And eventually, since Todd's the one who asked the question, I am hoping to write a sequel to the Forest God. I have some ideas for that.
Ready.
Yep. So, that might be coming out from Air Nothingness Press some point in the future.
That's very good ideas. I'm very how I forced you to write that. Novella.
Yeah. That's all because of Todd. He did actually make, like, he sent me the cover that it's the Forest God, which I don't have here, but if you Google it, you'll see it. It's a rabbit. And from that, I walked around my neighborhood thinking about rabbits and came up with this whole Forest God idea. And then, you know, if Betsy ever finishes the cover art for Left Hand Gods, that'll be at some point. So hopefully, oh, and my Pride and Prejudice retelling, because I've decided, so, you know, you have to have a brand, right? Like people like novels and I write short stories, and they like series and I write short stories. So I'm trying to like, you know, have a thing that people will read one thing and then keep reading, you know. And so I'm doing these retellings. So I've got the Rose by Any Other Name, which is the Romeo and Juliet one. I've got a Pride and Prejudice novel with witches that I hope to be putting out at some point. And then I've got the Much Ado About Nothing thing. And then I just started one that's Emma, except all the men are symbiotes instead of humans. So like when they get married, they become like a symbiotic entity. And until then, they're little, like, in my imagination, I haven't written it yet, but in my imagination, they're like little brains in like little four-legged steampunk like suits. And they just sort of like Krang in the Teenage Ninja Turtles cartoon, only with 4 legs instead of 2.
And Shakespeare tangentially will be in my Memphis.
Yes, yeah, I do have a story coming out in one of Todd's, that's Fathoms
Fathoms of the
above, yeah, Fathoms of the Earth, that will have a story by me and a story by my wonderful friend Amy Treadwell, who is also very talented and amazing. Yeah, I feel like there's definitely a couple more short stories that I have coming out soon, but if you go to my website, they're listed. Yeah, those are my plans. And now we have a little bit of time left if Douglas Gwilym wants to maybe read one more story so that we each get to read at least 2 things.
Oh, no, I have something super short.
Love that.
You know what? I'm gonna go super short. And everything, like almost every story, I think at this point for all 3 of us, there's some tie-in to like something that was going on. Frank got an idea in his head a couple of years ago that he wanted to,
Rub 2 brain cells together, something spark.
he thought we should have stories that were short enough to fit on a poster and that we could go around Pittsburgh and just like tack them to posts. You know, there was the Dirty Poet for a lot of years who did something similar, but to fit an entire coherent story on a single sheet, 8.5 by 11 was the goal. And we did a few of those.
Like, these could be things that you would misinterpret as something else, like
Yeah.
a car for sale or a job offering, not, you know, so you walk up not knowing it was, you're about to get hit by the weird.
Yeah. So I wrote a few of those and you wrote a few of those, and then you wandered off into writing stories you'd stick in wallets and like leave lying on the floor in public places for people to pick up. He has ideas. So this is Bassist Wanted. Experienced punk band seeks experienced bassist who can get up to speed fast for series of spring shows, including opening slots for some very impressive national acts. You got to contact us for details. You won't effing believe it. Rick is a badass lyricist, so your job is not that. The words are very important. You support that by driving and churning and grooving on the bass. Must have own gear that is not lame. Nobody knows like us that cheap gear is dangerous. Electrical fires look good in a music video, but it's nobody's fault but yours if your arm hairs and Rancid shirt go nuclear. Or if you're dumb enough to stand under Bill's 4x10, like our second bassist Ray did, when it's falling off the risers. We are not your babysitter. You must be clean, at least for practices and shows. We have no more room for narcissists in this band. We are full up. Rick's a good guy, but he's a man on a mission, and you gotta follow or get out of the way. Rehearsals will be held at the Brownsville Road U Store It, lot 14. Please park on the street, amp provided. Go around back to the right, not past the office doors. Johnny doesn't know we still practice here, and that's for the best. He's been super shaky since that windstorm blew the power lines onto the steel roof and lit our 3rd bassist, John Saylor, up like a Christmas tree. Don't worry about the smell. We're on the backside now, conveniently facing the ABC package store. We do go through bassists, but we get good press. Maybe you saw the spread in City Paper when we had the big benefit to help pay for Dolores's funeral. She was number 4, and that was a total fluke. We were rocking Germantown and nobody knew her ex was in town. And the police said his aim with that Old English 800 bottle was uncanny. Anyway, our sound is hardcore, but not too hardcore. Rick's words matter. They have to get out. They have to be out there. I get that some things about this may not seem ideal, but come on, man. Don't be a puss. This is punk rock.
All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Concerns. We have many concerns.
What ways can we find your books to buy?
Well, if you're physically here, I have copies. If you are on the internet, my self-published stuff is mostly available on Amazon. If you go to www.jamielackey.com and you go to my writing credits section, you can find links to everything that I have ever done that is still currently available. Not everything is. Some of it is like, I've been doing this for a long time. I've outlasted many markets. So some of them are no longer available.
How disturbing unsubscribed bird facts truly is until I heard you read it so sweetly. I love the story. It's nice to
It's a fun story. It was a lot of fun to write. I did a lot of research. I don't usually do a whole lot of research. I'm a fantasy writer, right? I mean, sometimes you do research, but some fantasy writers do way more research than I do, but I don't do a ton of research. This was a lot of fun to like look up all the bird facts. And like the deeper I got into bird facts, the more I was like, birds really are very scary, you guys. They're like so fast and they're so smart. And their beaks are so strong. They can see so well. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Devil's advocate and do the thing that I'm meant to do and say, the way I read the story, in some magical way, as this child who has been wronged deeply and has been torn from her family and is forced to call this idiot Papa,
Hector does suck
this
a lot.
monster, like as she is filling this egg with love and at the same time consuming all these facts about these different birds, somehow this creature inside the egg is being viewed with every impressive attribute.
Yep, that's definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you. Let's see. Well, we have some time. I haven't waved all my books around. All right.
About a bird.
Yeah. Go. Question.
Envision a bird like they're going on a page and seeing
I think the bird definitely just cares about what the little girl cares about. So I'm not sure how much rage she has about the exotic bird trade, but I imagine as she learns more about, the backstory of what happened to her, because maybe Hector has a journal because he seems like the type. Maybe she will take down the whole exotic bird trade
I think she's
from
gonna be
above.
really occupied with taking care of a bird that can cover a semi-truck.
I'm pretty sure that bird can take care of itself.
Okay, so she's gonna be chasing it across the countryside, trying to keep it from destroying humanity.
I imagine her actually riding it.
I like it.
Yeah, like it's. I think it's big enough to actually carry, especially a small child.
That is sufficient. I will take it.
Yeah.
For text, you just buy the first one.
Uh-huh. Okay, so we have a little bit of time. So my two other books that I have, this is the old cover of this. I don't know. You want to talk about things? I still don't have a cover for this that I like. Like the current cover, I don't really like either. This is my zombie novella, which is the first novella I ever wrote. So I'm very fond of it. It's about a character who ends up in a place where they're sort of isolated from people, and they're both about that. This is my zombie novella. This is my superhero novella. They're both about women who end up leaving their previous lives and being trapped in a tower, essentially, where they have to start over. I realized that after I wrote the second one that happened with them. But in this one, she gets bit by a zombie. When you get bit by a zombie, you don't turn into a zombie. You have the potential to turn into a zombie. And the longer you wait before you turn, the scarier you are. So essentially, it's Alcatraz, but everybody in it could turn into a super zombie at any time. And it's a love story. And this one, she's a superhero, but superheroes can go crazy at any time. And it's a love story. I maybe have some themes that I revisit. They're different, I swear. They're not just the same thing. They're just similarly themed. The two main characters are very different women. One is like the moving forward, she's middle-aged. Andromeda Snow, she's like early mid-20s. So, yeah, there are differences, I swear. But yeah, those are all the books I brought with me. I realized I counted the other day, and Shadows on Glass is my 10th book. I have 10 books out, which is just crazy. Like, it's for some reason 10 books seems more to me than just like almost 200 stories. I'm not sure why, but yeah. All right, we are pretty much out of time. So if you come back up here, my friends, thank you so much for joining me today
Sure,
and
please.
entertaining both this room just absolutely full of people and as well as the internet.
The whole internet.
The whole
whole
Is
internet
out there.
is, yeah, they're all watching all the time.
They do that. They always focus on one
Very-
thing.
Very 1984 of them. Yes, thank you all so much for coming. You can find Frank's got a Facebook fan page where you can like him and find links to his stories. He has, as he mentioned, stories in fantasy and science fiction, in world's best hardcore horror,
That is true.
or
Yes.
something similar to that.
That's about right.
Story in Novus Monstrum, which you heard the beginning of, and it is so good. So yeah, that's where you can find him. And then Douglas Gwilym has a website,
DouglasGwilym.com.
douglasgwilym.com.
Very similar to your site. There's a
can find
stories
links to his
page where you can
stuff.
see everything that's come out.
And
or-
his editorial work includes Novus Monstrum as well as some issues of Triangulation.
Yeah, Harmony and Dissonance, which I did with Frank. We co-edited.
And
Appetites,
Appetites.
Which he also did with Frank.
Yeah, I
Um,
have a collection of short stories coming out in the next year.
yes, it's just very exciting. And Frank will hopefully also have a collection of short stories when I can bully him into, getting it published. Yeah. So hopefully you'll be able to own those in the future. And like I said, I've got 10 books, so you could just get yourself a me shelf. I have a me shelf. So you won't be alone if you have a me shelf. You could be cool like me. But yeah, so thank you all so much for coming out and for being here and for supporting the arts. Thank you to the library for being a library. Libraries are amazing. And thank you to Cameron for letting us coach his room for a couple hours. All right. So again, thank you so much. I have books. Pete has books. You can buy books or get them for free from the library. The talking and like my my best friend from high school, like
Was my next
was
neighbor.
his
My-
next door neighbor, like
my
his sister,
babysat her.
and they shared a pony.
They did.
So,
Judy, her
like-
name was Judy. She was a hand shy of a horse.
Sure,
Yeah.
that's what makes a
It's odd
pony.
to
I
share
guess.
a
Large
pony.
pony.
I'm just saying,
What?
how does one share a pony? I know.
It's like a timeshare.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I got kicked that it was dealing with Egypt because you have stuff going on with Egypt, right?
It's true.
Yes.
It's true.
Mhm.
I'm turning 40 this year because time.
Just like Egypt, the
Continues.
pyramids.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
Same
also
age.
turning 40.
Same age, yeah. Any other questions?
How much do you think I could bench press?
When I write horror, I like to write really awful, like unlikable narrators and then have them die.